A huge crowd of the Walking Dead is chasing 3 men. They growl, overwhelm each other, reach out to the still alive with their cold and chilled, almost rotten, fingers. They don't care if they bring down their fellows, because for them only one thing is important: people with warm brains. One of the survivors of fear only manages to turn his head in order to look his fear in the eyes, while the 2 continue to try to escape, since the space between the houses is terribly narrow, and the bloodied zombies are only getting bigger. The guy screams loudly when his gaze bumps into such a huge crowd, which makes the businessman, whose head is covered with some kind of rag, even distracted, while the cook, judging by the clothes, is clearly in no hurry to stop. A loud mat comes out of a man's mouth before he accelerates sharply when a rotten and vile hand, which was missing several fingers, reaches for his leather jacket, wanting to either rip it off or pull the lively one in his direction. But then the guy abruptly turns sideways, instantly hitting the zombie on the arm, pushing that away from him with a loud clap, while the crowd from behind did not decrease for a second, but only increased. The dead man, it seems, only gets into a great rage from this, immediately opening his mouth, in which a couple of dozen sharp and uneven fangs were visible. And then he growled loudly, rushing with renewed vigor towards the living. A person, being struck by such an action, only sweats more cold, while his eyes are still looking at the pursuer with the same horror. A groan of displeasure escapes from him, and then a desperate cry. Why the hell is this game so realistic? But immediately a man in a chef's jacket grabs him by the fabric of his t-shirt, pulling at himself and shouting that he should stop fighting and just start running, which made the guy even a little shocked. But he did not argue. After a certain amount of time, the whole trio struggles to run to some musty and abandoned garage. It seems that the zombies have gradually begun to lag behind them. The door inside opens with a loud bang thanks to a kick from the cook. People literally fall in, immediately closing the door back and leaning on it with their whole body, which, God forbid, no dead man decided to come to them. But they don't see that there is someone's body behind the dusty mountain of boxes. After such a run, they all exhale together, immediately starting to gasp for air as soon as they are in a more or less safe place, while the businessman is still pressing against the door, ready to fall at any moment. The guy, still breathing heavily and drenched in seventh sweat, opens some kind of blue window, similar to a map, before shushing his fellow sufferers and informs them that there are no zombies here, and it's not worth luring them anyway. Indeed, on this map, his position is marked with a white arrow and zombies, with red dots that have spread throughout the nearest territory. While the 3 of them, frankly speaking, are staring at the blue game window, the body that previously lay completely motionless suddenly twitches its fingers, as if coming to its senses. A circle is spinning over the bloody guy, while the system reports that the information download is completed. The whole body immediately begins to tremble, as if in convulsions, and a strangled wheeze escapes from the mouth. A group of survivors reacts to this literally instantly, immediately jumping up and turning around in fear, screaming and not understanding what kind of sound it was. And the dead body immediately rises, on wobbly legs and with a crooked gait walking in their direction. From the mouth of a dead man, some incomprehensible and inarticulate set of symbols and words are constantly coming from. The cook notices with horror that they literally just said that there are no zombies here. What a rotten system. The unknown dead man is getting closer to them, opening his mouth, flashing bright scarlet eyes in their direction. The guy in the leather jacket immediately notices with displeasure that they immediately encountered a bug at launch. What a lame game. The purple-haired zombie continues to shine with his red, as if mechanical, eyes, again making some sounds, apparently trying to talk to them, but all to no avail. Frozen in fear, people just keep looking at him, and a blue status window pops up in front of him. Ling Yan, whose race was just an ordinary zombie, and all the other characteristics, in terms of health, hunger and strength, left much to be desired. With a numb look, he looks at all this. Did he get into the game world? Immediately comes an unexpected notification for the player. Please take into account that you are going through the main mission. You cannot leave the game until the mission is completed. What the hell? Can't Lin get out of the game for a shift? And what kind of mission is this anyway? But immediately from the subsequent thoughts are distracted by instantly approaching steps, from which it immediately becomes uncomfortable. The guy only raises his gaze in confusion before he encounters screaming people who are not just walking towards him, but literally running, waving everything they have, who is a guitar and who is a cast iron cauldron. Jan only has time to think that he doesn't understand what they are doing at all before he gets everything he can from them. The businessman swings a knife, kitchen utensils, and even flies on the head, and a musical instrument now, and then tries to hit in the ribs. He immediately begins to cover himself with his hands, shouting that, why are they attacking him? It's better to sit down and discuss everything. But all that comes out of him is indistinct, pitiful wheezing, while they continue beating, and the man in the leather jacket orders him to shut up altogether. And then Jan is distracted from the subsequent attacks as soon as something rings, and a blue window appears again in front of his eyes. It says that the final mission is to find out the truth about the outbreak of the virus and stop it. The guy immediately grabs his hair. How long will the main mission last? Customer service. He's not playing anymore, let him in. Why did he have to be trapped at the very beginning of the game? But then the guitarist stops as soon as he notices this gesture, urging everyone to wait. Do zombies know no one that you need to protect your head? Lin, with a happy smile and tears in his eyes, reaches out to them, already thinking with might and main that the self-proclaimed brothers have finally realized that he is not such a dead man at all like the others. But only in the eyes of living people. He looks like a complete monster, which yells at the whole garage. What a disgusting face. The businessman, squeezing his knife harder, says that if he understands everything correctly, then this zombie can be an elite monster, and their system simply has not been updated, therefore it has not registered it. And then, with a sharp movement, he pierces someone else's throat, cutting the carotid artery, which immediately begins to gush blood, and Jan himself only wheezes in surprise. The guy in the leather jacket immediately reports that there are a lot of valuables in elite monsters, so they will now kill zombies and get rich. And this phrase literally became a signal for the attacks of people to begin again, and with renewed vigor, while Lin is covering himself with his hands. No, he's just an ordinary zombie. In his thoughts, he has to literally beg them to stop, because it hurts. That's only then the realization comes to mind abruptly. It doesn't hurt. The dead man feels no pain at all. Does this mean that others like him have no feelings? Immediately, a blue status window pops up in front of your face. There it is reported that the feeling of pain is dulled, and the sensations from bodily injuries are weakened. He will only die if he severely injures his head. No wonder then that their attacks were ineffective. He has 2 more skills of this type. It turns out that zombies also have their advantages, and immediately someone else's knife blade digs into his leg, distracting the guy from the subsequent reading. Jan immediately frowns and clenches his teeth. If he doesn't fight back now, then these survivors will definitely cross all boundaries. A loud growl immediately bursts out of his throat, causing the attackers to instantly jump back and run to the door. The guitarist shouts that it was so loud that the zombies outside will definitely hear it, and the businessman echoes all of them to run. Otherwise they will not be able to. Immediately, Jan smiles with all sincerity and asks them not to leave, because you can talk. But from the outside he looks like an ordinary, grunting zombie, who also reaches out to them with his hand. But the door immediately slams shut, and the trail of the trio of survivors disappears just as quickly. And it would seem that this is even better, only at the same moment a red window pops up in front of the dead man's face. This is a warning that says that the player must take into account that his hunger level has reached 50%. When the level is below 25%, he will lose consciousness until he catches enough prey to satisfy his hunger and raise the level to 40%, after which control of the body will return. The hero immediately panics, clutching his head. If he does not eat, he will lose consciousness. What kind of stupid setup is this? Why does he have to be a zombie at all? But immediately his mood improves when Lin can see his characteristics again. He has as many as 10 power points, and in such games it is difficult for a simple player to earn even one. Even so, it would be better if he did not fall into the role of a zombie. When choosing the type of activity, there was no dead man, and that bastard just deceived him. Immediately, a memory comes to mind of how a whole crowd lined up behind red ribbons, in front of a building on which it was written Zombie World. And from the side, I watched a perfectly healthy and normal Young, who awkwardly confirms that there are somehow too many people here. He is upset thinking that he can only watch others play, so it's better to leave. But immediately a man in dark clothes runs into him, literally knocking the unfortunate guy off his feet, which is why he only has time to mumble an apology before he collides with someone else's gaze. The man under the hood looks not very, and then the stranger literally shoves a box with a disc and a helmet into his hands, urging him to take it all. The dazed Lin can only look at the front side of the box. The zombie world. Wait a minute. And as soon as he raises his head, he notices that the strange man simply disappeared from the field of view as if he had evaporated. Already in his own house, he starts the game, which is why its name and the start button appear on the monitor, while he himself looks at the helmet with interest. Well, you can try it for free, right? That is why he immediately pulls on a headdress. That's just that he immediately begins to squeak disgustingly, signaling that an unknown virus has struck something. And for some reason the hero himself began to feel dizzy at that moment. And now, in reality, the dead man quietly sighs, reaching for the door. It's so stupid to play this game, but it's worth finding food first. That's just that one is immediately opened by zombies, whose mouths are all covered in blood, and the remains of someone's flesh or clothes are in their teeth. The purple-haired man immediately covers his own lips with his palm, looking at this picture in shock. Did those guys get eaten? But the monsters are still not going to retreat from him, slowly advancing forward, while Lin himself is pressed into some kind of rack with his back, shouting for them to take a closer look, because he is exactly the same zombie, not a person. Unfortunately, the undead only growls and everything moves towards him, stretching out their rotten and decrepit hands, crowding into the room. Hell, when the door locks, he'll be just as dead as the three of them. Ian must fight. That's why he slams his fist into someone else's face with all his stupidity, causing the rot to fall to the floor before he looks up and realizes that he is finished. A whole line of inhumans lined up in front. Those with loud growls and grunts rush in his direction, opening their disgusting mouths. But it turns out that they do not want to attack the guy, but the zombie who fell, immediately leaning on him and starting to gnaw into pieces, why he was in mild shock at all. But apparently, the instincts of self-defense act when necessary, because he immediately runs out of the open passage, rushing to run as far as possible. Zombies are too realistic, disgusting. As he progresses, he manages to stumble upon a huge building with the sign How Ki Lai Supermarket, which makes him immediately rush inside. According to the rules, the dead will attack first. Over time, there will be fewer and fewer people, and the combat capability will only increase. When this happens, the zombies will starve, therefore they will attack representatives of their own species. After the whole snack, consisting of products that could be found inside the supermarket, he thinks that 10 points are required for development. He should improve the quality, but how to gain experience? New players of the human race can share information, and he, being a zombie, will have to find out everything himself. If he doesn't complete the mission, he won't be able to exit the game. What a nightmarish beginning. But immediately the rumbling of the stomach breaks out of my thoughts, and someone's voice mutters, "Hungry. Meat. Still hungry." Immediately another warning pops up that he should pay attention to the fact that his hunger level is now 30%. When the level drops to 25%, he will lose consciousness until he catches enough prey to satisfy his hunger. The level will decrease until the hero consumes food or dies. Immediately, the guy grabs his head in panic, drooling. What's happening? He ate so much and no effect. What if? The system interrupts all subsequent thoughts, informing him that he can only eat meat to satisfy his hunger. And where can I find him? I ask. But Jan abruptly throws a glance to the side when an unknown voice whispers there. Vision through the walls allows you to distinguish the silhouettes of wandering zombies, while the animal alter ego repeats everything. Over there, meat. Eat it. Clutching his head, he literally forces himself to turn away from this sight. Annoy. Why is the game so strange? Too realistic. We need to find some loner, otherwise it will be too dangerous. But then the voice rumbles louder and louder, screaming meat. Damn, he seems to be going completely crazy. Coming out from behind some shelving, still holding his head, he stumbles upon a completely single hunched silhouette. Drooling more and more, he immediately realizes with an enthusiastic look that he needs to be taken. Lin instantly flies out of his small hiding place, rushing towards the barely walking undead, stretching out his palms. And then, as soon as he runs closer, he immediately grabs the man and bites that shoulder, tearing out part of the flesh with the fabric of the shirt, under someone else's wheezing and growling. But the zombie immediately turns to him, shooting at the player with his scarlet eyes, still making incomprehensible sounds, before grabbing his elbow and biting part of the flesh of his forearm. Damn it, he bites. The purple-haired one immediately orders him to stop, swinging his fist for a blow, which soon falls on the very skull of the monster. But all the phalanges and other bones seem to just crack and crumble inside from just one collision. With a loud roar, the undead only finally tears off the flesh, and the hero himself manages to jump back at this moment, clamping the wound and thinking that this is all very strange, since the indicators of this bastard, much higher than his own, Indeed, the blue window above the enemy shows that he has 15 points of strength and only 1 level of dexterity. Then it's not surprising that he didn't care about Ian's attempts to kill a stranger. Well, since he is not able to deal with him, then we must run. Why does he immediately rush forward, running away, but at some point turns to look back and freezes for a moment? So, as expected, with level 1 agility, running is much slower than he thought. Indeed, the recent opponent is barely dragging himself in his direction, which makes a grin appear on his face. Lin turns to him completely, continuing to clamp the wound and smile. Let this dead man not blame him for being so slow, because he just wants meat. And now the guy will arrange a real feast for him. After some time in the kitchen utensils section, the purple-haired man is breathing heavily, wiping sweat from his forehead. Everything was ready. Immediately, a familiar carcass looks out from behind the rack, while the player himself squeezes the knife harder. Just let him come. And as soon as the zombie comes closer at some point, at the same second a knife blade flies into his skull, which makes the dead man in the shirt just stand still incomprehensibly, and Jan himself begins to throw all sorts of utensils at him. Pans, cleavers, pots and much more are used, while the enemy catches most of his face and body, growling discontentedly, before a minute later immediately goes into a rage, starting to shout loudly to the whole neighborhood, flashing scarlet eyes. And this is quite enough for the rest of the zombies to instantly perk up when they hear their brother. The hero understands that he needs to finish as soon as possible, when the undead rushes to run at him with all their legs, trying either to tear him to shreds and eat him, or just kill him. But he managed to prepare well, because a stick was spread out between the shelves, on which the cleavers were wound with the blade forward, which the non-human stumbled upon with his feet, immediately losing part of his lower limbs. Under the influence of gravity, he has to fall forward, and on the floor, as luck would have it, there are sharp buttons lying around, which immediately dig into rotten flesh, causing the dead man to roar. And then Ian looms over him, who swings, I don't understand where he came from, with an axe, shouting that he should die. The zombie only looks up at him, growling pityingly, before his head flies off somewhere to the side, and the purple-haired man himself exhales softly and sits down, lowering the axe, while a lifeless body lies in front of him. Immediately, he calmly tears off a piece of flesh with one hand, bringing it to his face with disgust, reminding himself for greater confidence that this is all a game, and meat is just data. Despite the fact that the player does not feel the smell, he still holds his nose and puts the rod in his mouth. It tastes worse than spoiled and smelly tofu, but he still swallows this lump, before a second later his face immediately lights up with unprecedented joy. What is this feeling? This type of stratification is just wonderful. And judging by the pop-up window, the level of hunger was thickened, reaching 100%. And after that, Lin notices with his peripheral vision another crowd of the dead that ran here because of the recent scream. It seems, he thinks, that zombies do not allow others to enjoy their food in peace. That is why, grabbing the corpse by the leg, that sharp movement throws it towards his half-brothers, shouting that they take it away, because this is their reward from him. And as soon as the undead are distracted, the boy himself runs away from them as far as possible, into the depths of the supermarket. After that, he manages to get into some kind of room, similar to a restroom, into which he runs and closes the door behind him with a latch, and then literally falls on his 5th point. Tired, immediately another update pops up, which asks him to take into account the fact that he ate a representative of his species. That's why cannibalism was acquired and a reward was given, so it's worth looking at the status window. Did he manage to get the skill? Indeed, a glutton appears, which makes it possible to inflict 10% more damage to its kind. If he had had it from the very beginning, he wouldn't have had to work so hard, but from killing his kind, or also gets experience points. Then you just need to use your brains, and you won't have to wait so long for the level increase. And it would seem that there was a moment for rest, but then some sounds are heard outside the door, and Lin himself notices that it does not look like a zombie. And after that, voices are heard, there is a lot of food and not enough zombies. Then what are we waiting for? Kill them faster and replenish supplies. We have almost completed the mission. We cannot make a mistake. Players again. The purple-haired man gets up from his seat, carefully opening the door and leaning out a little. It looks like they've gathered at the supermarket. But then his eyes widen in surprise as he looks at the newcomers. What? There's a damn gun in someone else's hand. Isn't the guy too strong? The man is standing around the corner, from which he soon leans out, holding a gun in his hands and looking towards the dark corridor, trying to locate the zombies, before he returns back to the whole crowd of survivors. He says that he will stay at the door, and the rest should follow the plan and collect resources. And there is no need to make noise. They should also all meet here in exactly 10 minutes. The rest immediately let you know that they understood everything. After that, standing at the shelves, one girl calls out to her sister, showing a package of some food, but she replies that it's definitely not worth taking high-calorie food while Jan is watching them, who literally stuck to the glass opposite the survivors, flashing his scarlet eyes. The brown-haired woman immediately seems upset by such an answer, which is why the sharply softened blonde replies that their bag has a limited volume, so you can only take one of this type. But even this causes her sister delight. The guy notices with irritation that they can at least eat snacks in order to replenish their energy reserves, and he himself has to eat only smelly zombies. Pressing harder against the glass and breathing, he continues to drill into someone else's back with his bright eyes. And the girl, it seems, having felt it, instantly freezes, as if rooted to the spot, not sure whether it seemed to her to live or not. At the same moment, she turns around in fright, but the walking dead immediately moves on, completely disappearing from sight. Already running past other shelves and a window frame, he freezes for a while as soon as he hears another conversation. The crowded guys are discussing something violently. One of them discontentedly asks if they really need to call a group of NPCs to share resources, to which he receives an answer from the second that his brother needs to think about the future, because he himself is playing the beta version, and that soldier clearly has a secret mission, so they need to increase trust, and the man give them a gun as a reward for the task. The third immediately shouts that they will get rich instantly, because this is a good weapon. Meanwhile, Ian himself thought about the fact that if the players have a gun at the initial stage, they will become too strong, and then how to survive zombies. It looks like only these three are players. They should not be given weapons at all. Immediately, a terrible scream is heard throughout the neighborhood, to which this trio, and the soldier, and the dead along with him react. They were girls who already looked tortured. The blonde embraces her sister and shouts to some people with knives so that they do not think to approach them. But right there, one of the main ones immediately slaps her, shouting for her to shut up, and if some bastards have attracted the attention of zombies, then he uses them as bait. The girl only glares at him angrily and hugs the trembling body of the brown-haired woman more tightly. The man swings again, asking who she thinks she is, that she dares to look at him that way. But immediately a soldier grabs his wrist, ordering him to stop. He immediately wrings Tom's hand, grabbing his head and lowering it down. Doesn't he know how dangerous it is outside? Does he have anything in his head? All he knows is to create problems. At the same moment, the players run up, shouting if everyone here has gone crazy, while the man releases the freak from his grip. The soldier immediately pulls a knife out of his belt, saying that now is not the time for this, especially since they can't wait here, so everyone better get ready to break through. Jan, hiding behind the shelves, just smiles contentedly. In addition to this military, no one has a normal weapon for longer, which means that he had a chance to win easily. And then a bell rings. The pop-up magnification again asks him to take into account that he has launched a side mission, the weakling that everyone is mocking. And the essence of it is that he has to ensure the safety of two girls in the store and kill those who threaten them. What? Not only is the guy a zombie, so he also has to save two non-player characters. This is some kind of mockery, no doubt. The reward for the mission is the trust of 2 female students plus 5. There may also be others, according to the progress of the task. NPC trust. What is the use of this? But then Lin thinks about it. He remembers the player's recent phrase that for completing a soldier's mission, he can give them a gun, which means that there is still some sense in this trust. After a couple of minutes, Yude makes his way through the crowd of the rest of the dead, shouting to his brothers to let him pass, but it seems they don't really want to do it. And the closer they get, the more you can see the crowd of survivors, who gathered in a circle and began to fight off the undead, then with an axe, then with knives. The purple-haired man himself notices that beginners know how to use the arrangements, which means that this soldier is a good leader. Well, then now he will check their combat capability. Changing his position, he pushes one of the zombies in the back, causing the inhuman to immediately lose his balance and fall forward, growling indignantly. Noticing him, the player immediately shouts beware, before one sharp movement blows the enemy's head off his shoulders. The hero clucks, noticing that these players are quite capable, therefore it will be difficult for the low intellectual dead to win. He thinks for a moment, If they work in a team, then Yan can also be a tank, as long as he does not suffer much damage. That is why he rushes ahead of everyone, shouting something inarticulate, meaning by this that he will be able to protect everyone. Immediately, one of the guys tightens his grip on the knife, which he then throws forward. The blade's end is literally aimed at the very head of his half-brother, whom Lin watches with concern before abruptly grabbing it with his hand. A growl comes out of him again, which implies that the bastard who threw him is supposed to know that it is dangerous to use the devices this way. And the undead, who almost lost his head, looks at his savior with surprise. The guy shouts out, urging everyone to look at their own block of zombies, which he saves from each flying object, while one of the survivors notices that he is behaving strangely enough and orders everyone to be much more careful. But immediately some wild scream breaks out of the tank, while he, spreading his arms and legs, continues to catch weapons even with his own body, which incredibly scares people. One of the guys immediately guesses that the player is protecting monsters, while the soldier says that he is reasonable and should be dealt with first. The rest of the guys, apparently taking this as a real order, immediately rush in his direction, waving their weapons and ordering him to die. And even though he was found out, he manages to substitute the block with his hands. The sword has a limited lesson at all, and stones are not applied at all. And if the stupid bench press doesn't hurt his head, then he won't die. One of the attackers is so angry that Jan cannot be killed that the guy, despite his friend's attempts to calm him down, rushes forward again with a knife, shouting that he does not believe and wishing the creature a speedy death while the player continues to stand. And then a smile blooms on his face. Bought it. The soldier, noticing this, orders the idiot not to leave the building and immediately return back. But he doesn't care. And rushing ahead, the survivor only notices at the end that Lin himself successfully dodged. But the unfortunate guy stuck his knife into another zombie, literally colliding with his body, which, of course, immediately devours the crowd. A notification immediately pops up that an enemy minor character has been successfully killed. +2 experience has been obtained. With a tense exhalation, the hero concludes that you should never get angry for no reason. But one more and he will be able to raise the level. The soldier watching the devouring monsters immediately orders everyone to move away, because the blood makes the opponent's attacks stronger. The other two players immediately turn their tails between their legs, at least one, whining that everything is too realistic and he wants to get out of here as soon as possible, while the second tells him not to be a coward, because it will be more difficult. And it is at this moment that an axe is knocked out of the latter's hands, driving him into a corner, and the zombie who attacked him only opens his mouth wider. And at the same moment, a soldier appears in front of the guy, who instantly kills the undead with a pistol, saving Puffy from death. He orders everyone to take their weapons and get up. Moreover, he has only one bullet left. Later he will come for him, so they should work together. And then the man fires the gun again, and that single bullet grazes the cheek of Jan, who even tried to dodge. Seriously, what? He immediately turns around, starting to run in the opposite direction, and thank his brothers for the fact that now the soldier does not have a ranged weapon. That's just as luck would have it. The Inhumans rush at their fellow man, who has the same bullet in his brain, which is why Lin only shouts in amazement to a bunch of garbage so that they don't eat their kind. Meanwhile, the man stands up and shouts that this is their chance, and orders the countdown to begin. Making his way further through the crowd, he notices a lonely guy with a smile. Fortunately, they are busy with it, so the formation is broken. And while the loner is trying to fight off other zombies, the purple-haired one trudges to him from behind before sharply biting under someone else's scream. The experience goes +1. Immediately leaving the scene of the crime, he bypasses the zombies crowding to a new snack, making his way to the rest of the group of survivors who are watching in horror. And as soon as he stretches out his hand, thinking that the soldier has been caught, the player immediately jumps up to him, offering his hand for a snack. Has this bastard gone crazy? The dead man immediately throws him aside to another undead, who are not averse to eating again. And the guy himself yells that if they die, they will be able to be reborn, since only one player is needed to complete the mission, so it's worth protecting the military. And when Ian rushes at the man again, another player kicks some guy in the back, forcing him to literally fly into the purple-haired one, not giving him the opportunity to get closer to the leader. The two of them fall, and the hero, without a twinge of conscience, instantly pierces the survivor's neck, getting another experience point. At the same second, a warning pops up that there is little health left, and after death it is impossible to be reborn, as well as it is impossible to exit the game. Does that mean he's going to die? What a stupid game. The soldier immediately begins to resent why they are protecting him, but the player simply asks to give him the gun. And while this verbal sparring is going on, Lin decides that now is the time to hide before they notice, so he goes somewhere, holding his shoulder. And at the same moment, a man with glasses appears behind him, who swings, shouting that their boss died because of him, so he should die too. Immediately, a sharp and shiny blade appears in front of the face. All he can do is watch before blood splatters in all directions. Damn, what did he do wrong if he had to die here? Lin does not agree with this. The guy immediately clamps the knife blade between his palms, which was ready to pierce his head at any second. Find out the truth about the outbreak of the virus and stop its spread. Save 2 schoolgirls. The zombie abruptly snatches the sharp weapon from the man's paws, causing him to lean back dumbfounded. Yes, he put a bolt on all these things. Already normally taking the knife in his palm, he swings at the stunned survivor. He's just wants to live. And immediately the blade passes with such force that it literally cuts the person standing in front of him in half, causing the blood to immediately splash in different directions, and the opponent, without even having time to squeak, falls dead. A window immediately pops out, notifying that another experience point has been received, and he himself falls to the 5th point, breathing heavily and looking in amazement at the corpse lying next to him. Another notification from the system pops up again, which asks the player to pay attention to the fact that the conditions of evolution have been met, and the HP scale has been fully restored. And now he needs to choose the direction of that very evolution. The body and wounds of the dead man begin to flicker with bright green lights, gradually enveloping his master and restoring all the wounds that he managed to get during all the skirmishes, and he himself blissfully exhales. Evolution is finally here. Soon 2 directions pop up in front of him, strength and commander. Both look good, as Jan notices, wanting to poke at one thing at the same second, but the sharp blue window turns red, signaling a warning. During the process of evolution, he will temporarily lose consciousness, and the process itself takes only 10 minutes, so you should find a safe place for this case. Fortunately, 2 buttons are given to choose from, one with refusal and the other with continue. The purple-haired man looks at the red window in panic. Damn, now this evolution is tantamount to suicide. He needs to gain more experience and take a chance. He immediately starts poking at the window. The player's stats are balanced, but their strength is not as high as his. That is why, as long as he increases dexterity, he can safely not evolve. The guy goes to the Vauban, still continuing to click on the plus sign about dexterity, whose points were already equal to 6. After a while, the dead man stands up in a stand, and his eyes burn with a red flame more than ever, and behind, like his own personification, the silhouette of a black panther looms. Well, what? Let's go. Immediately, like a bolt of lightning, he pushes off at right angles from every zombie he meets, which, as if on purpose, began to crowd again, grunting and still trudging after his fast brother. And Ian himself is shouting with might and main that it looks like a full-fledged flight, while one of the players who stayed to protect the soldier is only twitching from the sight he saw, not understanding what it is at all. And the survivor, along with the military, watch in horror as this something runs at them, like a battering ram, wanting either to finish them off on the spot or to demolish them completely. And in a sense, both options turned out to be correct, because Lin, because of such a huge speed, manages to swing his fist and hit a person in the face, muttering something inarticulate again. But if translated into human, then there was a simple shut up. The dumbfounded one only watches this picture for a few seconds before shouting to the whole neighborhood that this zombie has increased agility, and then at the same second jumps into the air, waving his knife and calling on the beaten comrade to run as soon as possible, because the target of the dead man is himself. The player only has time to look up at the man before the blood starts gushing sharply, splashing up in a huge stream. But instead of depriving the undead of their heads or hearts, the blade of the knife with all the dope pokes into someone else's palm, which just happened to be in danger in time, piercing that through like some kind of toy, while the purple-haired man himself shouts something again, which means just in time. And the man who continues to stick the blade only deeper, impaling a pale hand, looks dumbfounded at the monster. The soldier shouts damn, grabbing his second palm in order to resist the pressure of Jan, who, as if on purpose, pierced his upper limb only more, leaning forward and growling terribly, before at one moment twitches and bites his fangs into the forearm of a living man, tearing the flesh completely, causing the man to cry out painfully, not having managed to react properly to an unexpected attack. As soon as everything that is needed has been done, Lin rushes to run away, towards the 2 girls who hid behind the column, while the soldier himself grabs a new wound, and several zombies appear behind him, who actively begin to stretch out their rotten fingers to him. The blonde one immediately shouts out to his sister that he is coming as soon as he sees a reasonable dead man running. And behind him the remaining player and the soldier are going to, if not tear to shreds, then at least cripple, under brothers. The girls immediately fall to the floor, grabbing each other and starting to scream in fright when the hero with an open mouth sticks out to them, again trying to explain something with his grunting. But at some point, he just grabs the schoolgirls one by one, throwing them on his shoulders, to which the blonde screams indignantly, and the second one just almost cries, not knowing how to react to it. And only then, when the guy continues to run with them, the brown-haired woman completely falls into decline, it seems, having lost consciousness and part of her soul. And her sister does not stop, starting to beat the savior on the leg, shouting that he immediately let them go. But the latter, it seems, does not care at all about it. He skips away as far as possible, while a player with glasses on his head is watching this awkward picture, noticing that zombies are very selective in eating, while one of those monsters standing next to him only grunts in response, seeming to agree with such an assumption. Also watching this trio, and then they awkwardly exchange glances with the guy, as if a recent conversation could somehow really smooth out the situation and solve absolutely all the problems. But no, the rest of the undead also rushes after the survivor, causing him to run away somewhere deep, screaming for help, throwing his hands up while the soldier sits near the wall, looking at the corpses in front of him in confusion. And already at this, Lin looks back, continuing to hold the two ladies on his shoulders, saying that the recent rival was very brave. But in any case, he can easily be reborn. The purple-haired man runs up to some door, which he opens with one straight kick, which makes a loud bang seem to be heard throughout the supermarket, while the schoolgirls seem to have completely lost all hope that they will be able to escape from the grip. And then he throws them against some wall, from which they cry out, not really understanding what just happened, before the older one immediately grabs the younger one, squeezing her in her arms and trying to protect her in this way, squinting with an evil look at the zombie approaching them, who he dusts off his palms with might and main and thinks with a smile that the job is done. And fortunately, they were not attacked at all while they were screaming, which means that the task is completed. That's why he immediately turns around and runs to other boxes, leaving the girls completely alone in the second half of some rundown and dusty utility room. Running behind the shelter, he sits down on the floor with a sense of accomplishment, immediately opening the blue window and thinking that now he will be able to evolve quite calmly. But immediately his face wrinkles in either a grimace of anger or disgust. No, may this damn system fail. It's still the lowest race, and it turns out that Ian tried hard for this. He's biting the developer of this damn game to death. So, the following is written under the directions. The main characteristics are increased in a moderate range in all directions. All characteristics are higher than those of ordinary zombies. The direction of zombie mutant evolution has been greatly improved in terms of characteristics. New skills will be acquired depending on the degree of variation. The enraged guy immediately jumps up from his perch, starting to jump and growl loudly, which translates as "fucking game. Let me in. I want to go home," while the girls, hearing this, immediately clung to each other only stronger, and the younger one whimpered, calling her sister. Also, the next direction asks the player to be careful when choosing the direction of evolution for the first time, since the next ones will be subject to changes. Lin clutches his head in panic, immediately thinking about his choice. The strongman, of course, will increase his strength, and the commander fits the military strategy. Both directions have their advantages, so it is difficult to choose one. Oh, I don't care anymore. At the same second, he pokes at the first thing that comes to hand, the commander, while his body begins to envelop some strange glow, from which the next minute the player screams heart-rendingly, as if he is being electrocuted. And the schoolgirls seem to be only more frightened, clearly not understanding what is happening to the zombies. Literally after another couple of seconds, he falls wearily back into place, and the subsequent notification asks him to pay attention to the fact that he decided to evolve into a zombie of the lowest level commander, and the evolution itself will begin in 10 seconds. So he should ensure his safety during this process. The guy only finds the strength to quietly mumble a reminder that the game did not forget to give him a reward for the task. The brown-haired woman immediately asks the blonde why the undead suddenly abruptly quieted down, to which the latter replies with tension that she does not know, but they clearly should be careful, because it definitely may not end well. That is why they decide to sit quietly and wait for at least something, or maybe even talk quietly, sitting opposite each other, before the world darkens before the young man's eyes. After a certain amount of time, he begins to regain consciousness, gradually opening my eyes and seeing someone else's shoes in front of me. One of the schoolgirls asks the other if they have to do it all. Of course, the answer follows, while the vision becomes more and more distinct and rises higher, focusing on other people's knees, on which the knee socks were torn with might and main. Finally, he manages to raise his gaze enough to face other people's faces. The older one asks the other if she wants to wait until their new acquaintance wakes up and eats them, while the most holds some kind of metal tube, as if she could really save them. But immediately another NPC starts muttering, but he, turning his head towards the slowly waking up dead man. Before they both freeze, and she finally manages to say that their new acquaintance has woken up. Status windows immediately appear above them. The blonde is called Shiyu and her confidence has as many as 6 points. The second is called Shiyin, but she has 5 points. Both have weak status. The guy just clutches his head in confusion, not understanding why he can see the characteristics of the NPC. Is this his new skill? It's not easy for ordinary players to get such a skill. You need to see what else has changed. Therefore, ceasing to pay attention to schoolgirls, he immediately begins to poke at his own with a smile. All points have increased and there are as many as 3 new skills, one of which is scanning. A commander whose racial skills can be improved with skill points has the following description. To change the intelligence of his race, you need to spend a small amount of stamina. Actually, it's great for managing a zombie team. A powerful virus, as it improves, it has more and more opportunities to infect people. With a smile, the guy only thinks that scanning is really a thing. With him, he will be able to see the characteristics of the players. I almost forgot about the most important thing. Naturally, this is the reward for the completed task, which is displayed in the window like a huge box. Poking at it, a window of additional information immediately appears in front of it, since the task was completed with a coefficient of 120%, and the trust of the 2 schoolgirls was increased by +5. And due to the fact that the player has exceeded the task, he receives additional rewards, +1 skill point. In addition, there are also improved skills. The rewards for an additional mission are pretty good, but it's still not worth running into such a thing anymore. Rare skill points should also be added to the newly developed ones, which is why he improves the commander by +1. Which is why stamina is now spent to control the aimless movement of zombies for 5 seconds. 1 turned into 5. Not bad, it seems it was the right decision. That is why soon he exhales in a relaxed manner, before a second later he turns to the sisters frozen with horror, saying that they should not be afraid, because they are his task, but they do not understand their savior at all. And after that, he looks even more frightening, muttering something that translates as "I'll cover you." But this only makes the schoolgirls tense up and grab each other more, babbling that it's very scary. And the older one puts the pipe forward at all. And at the same second, the guy runs out of the room, leaving the girls who do not understand anything behind, who only look after the retreating back. Ian awkwardly informs his sister that he seems to have left, while Yu only comes forward, saying that it is too dangerous here and they need to find a way to escape. So after the elder asks if the younger blames her for bringing her to such a place. Of course not. The brown-haired woman even says that everything her sister does was right. Going out to the escalators, she asks if the zombies are visible, but the supermarket room turns out to be completely empty. And then we see why. A guy is hiding behind one column. The captain's skill was activated, so all the undead left from the first floor to the second. Go ahead, at least that's the only way he can help them. And they support each other, at least someone would help him. But the next moment, Lin freezes in amazement, as if rooted to the spot, when he feels some kind of hostile and evil gaze of scarlet eyes behind him. It's a feeling, something's wrong, and it's up there. Looking up, he immediately receives a new alert that asks him to pay attention to the fact that the player has entered the territory of another zombie lord. Before this undead is eliminated or Yang himself leaves this territory, this overlord will have a high degree of hostility towards him. Did the threat appear after the update or what? He immediately rushes from his seat, trying to run in the other direction, away from the escalators, before a bright red warning flashes in front of his face again. He launched the long-term hidden mission Overlord. Like this Lord of the Dead, the guy can also designate his territory, but at the same time, others in other territories will be hostile towards him. Mission rewards are distributed in stages and determined according to the location outlined by the player himself. The zombie lord will randomly drop items. As soon as he saw the phrase about the award, he immediately darted back to the escalators like a wild boar, intending to go up in a moment. Once there, his foot touches some stone, and he tightens his grip on his knife, thinking that the level of the new target must be higher than his own, and he has a strong feeling of suppression. But as soon as he looks up, he faces a huge crowd of dead people. It's strange somehow, why are they all standing here? Or maybe it's because of hierarchical suppression, not because of him. It seems that the Lord is located on the 3rd floor. Raising his palm up, some blue impulses immediately begin to spread from it, while Lin himself thinks that it will probably be impossible to fight one-on-one. But if you don't let the zombies climb up, then he will have to go down to him, and he himself is already using them as a human shield. After a couple of minutes, he sits down on a part of the escalator, immediately opening the status window, deciding to look at the scheme of the 3rd floor while all the undead crowded around him, looking with interest at the blue window. Gathering his strength, Yan jumps off the seat and tightens his grip on his sharp weapon, looking up. It's just for the reward. Let's go. The body is instinctively afraid, which can be judged by the trembling knees. What's going on? All for the reward. Climbing up the escalator, he immediately pinches his nose with his fingers, wincing when a very unpleasant smell begins to reach him. That's the real stench. But as soon as he goes further, he sees a huge silhouette ahead, illuminated in red. Is he there? There's only one zombie here, and this guy isn't much. And at the same moment, a status window pops up over the unknown. His race is an improved medium-level zombie, but the threat level is high. Well, wow. And the dead man, who had been quietly chewing flesh before, turns his head sharply, flashing his bright scarlet eyes, which makes Lin only open his own in surprise, looking at the bully. The same monster with a body covered with all sorts of pimples, which have become inflamed to such an extent that they are already covered with pus, holds someone's gnawed leg in his palm, slowly turning to the running hero. Noticing him, the zombie immediately throws the half-eaten flesh aside, seeing the food much more nutritious, while Ian himself is given the opportunity to examine someone else's lit-up blue status window. The name is unknown, and his race is a medium-level zombie with strength 30. Are they laughing at him? The guy himself has only 12 points of this characteristic, and also the fact that this bully considers him as a potential enemy does not make the situation better. Yes, and trust has -5, but he has as much as 4 units less dexterity. The undead immediately opens its mouth wide and starts yelling so loudly and with such force that all this airflow almost completely knocks the player off his feet, which is why the latter only has to cover himself with his hands, trying to stand still while all sorts of boards or beams fly by on his sides, and a whole column of dust rises. And then this huge monster rushes at him, stretching out its paws and shouting food, clearly wanting to replace the recently interrupted meal, while the hero himself immediately starts rushing away headlong, looking back at the man who kept trying to overtake him. Why is he so fast? Does this big guy really have less dexterity than him? But as the chase progresses, Lin's gaze stumbles upon a life-saving sign with a bright sign diner that hung from the ceiling. Considering that this is exactly his last chance for salvation, he jumps up and grabs the hanging sign with his hands, squeezing tightly, while he himself clamped the knife blade between his teeth and swung forward a little, trying to throw his legs into the air at least a little. And at this very moment the same lord runs below, rushing like an abnormal, or maybe like an elephant, before it crashes into the nearest wall with all its stupidity, which instantly splits into splinters and stones, scattering on different sides and spreading out with cracks all over its surface. The player, meanwhile, jumps down at all, pulling the knife out of clenched teeth. It was damn close, but fortunately all the items were updated, so he was just very lucky. And while the bully is standing near the wall, which is all covered with cracks and remnants of his former past, the guy looks at his current opponent with great surprise and even shock, squeezing the handle of the sharp weapon harder. That's the power. And by the way, did he just say food? But after a second, the purple-haired man convinces himself that he just imagined it. Yes, and it is necessary to end this as soon as possible, and he will receive a reward, which is why he himself rushes towards the zombies, and in the end he jumps up at all, pushing off with his feet and swinging a knife for a subsequent blow, while the unknown only breathes heavily, and looks into the void with his mouth open, flashing his scarlet eyes into the dilapidated butt. The end of the knife just knocks against someone else's skin, without causing any damage. And the hero himself realizes with horror that the Lord is damn durable, and no matter how many blows he strikes, all this will be completely useless. And the bully reacts to this only by turning his head, before at the same second yelling at him die. And with a sharp movement of his hand, he throws the annoying kid aside, like some kind of nasty fly, which, as luck would have it, stuck to him. The body of the unfortunate immediately flies into the nearest glass, which causes the latter to completely break into small fragments, also flying in different directions, as a dilapidated wall recently did, while groaning escapes from it itself. Barely able to stand on his feet, He immediately coughs up blood, grabbing his cut hand and thinking that this big guy is too strong, which means that it will definitely not be possible to fill him up in the forehead. He himself does not know if the commander's skills can help at all now. The situation is getting worse and worse, and this lord himself instantly turns to face him and starts running ahead again, stretching his arms forward and continuing to growl, or even groan, wanting to get it over with and get rid of the cheeky guy who interrupted his dinner. It seems completely desperate. Yan stretches out his palm forward, which immediately lights up bright blue, and he also shouts something inarticulate, which translates as stop. And immediately, as the aura gradually spreads to the entire body of its owner, it also envelops the huge carcass of the master, which makes him immediately stop dead, and from a recent gust of air from running, small clouds of dust spread throughout the room. And since the skill has no long-term effect, the hero, under the surprised gaze of a stranger, rushes headlong towards him again, before finally bending down and slipping under the opponent's feet, pulling out a knife in time, the blade of which cut through not only someone else's pant leg, but also part of the calf, which caused blood to immediately gush out of the incision. Delivering Tom is uncomfortable. No one would obviously be happy about such an injury, and as soon as such a little prank was over, he immediately jumps to his feet, running away, holding his wounded arm and only thinking more about what to do as soon as possible. Meanwhile, the departed zombie only screams loudly, bleeding, before soon turning after the fleeing one. And the guy, like a real stuntman, runs to the escalators before jumping and rolling down the soft tapes of the device, and then jumps again, landing behind a crowd of dead people who were swarming in front of the very first lifting ladder. Deciding to take advantage of this very pandemonium, thinking that in this way it will help stop the fat guy, Lin directs his palm at the undead, which lights up again with a blue aura, which is instantly transferred to the peculiar brethren. He immediately shouts at them in the supposed language of the race, which translates as "Guys, block the stairs." Why those, like obedient dummies, immediately move to carry out the order. Immediately, a dark silhouette of a bully appears at the top, in which only bright red dots in the shape of eyes are distinguished. He instantly opens his mouth, starting to shout loudly and viciously, while the dead are moving towards him, climbing the stairs, while a young man is watching all this cacophony, stunned by the fact that the big guy still came, but does not remove his hand, continuing to use his skill, despite the fear that has appeared. The man's huge palm immediately grabs one of the unfortunate zombies by the head, literally grabbing the entire skull and squeezing hard in his grip. Yes, so much so that, grabbing his shoulder, the Lord simply tears his head off his neck in an instant, still continuing to scream heart-rendingly and loudly, moving down the stairs, which makes the rest of the undead even scared when they see this picture. The mutant abruptly throws the bloody body into the crowd that gathered on the escalator, causing a couple of brothers to immediately fall on different sides, while others only open their mouths in horror, but some are still aggressively disposed towards the stranger under the influence of someone else's skill. It is these zombies who rush at the bully, grabbing his hands, then his legs, then his shoulders, starting to bite in every possible way, while he screams with might and main, not understanding what is happening, and the rivals are not decreasing. They continue to jump on top of him, tormenting the rotten flesh, which for them was like a tasty morsel. The hero, who watched with a smile before, understands that it is necessary to act right now. That's why he jumps up and literally rushes forward over other people's heads, while the zombies under the action of the skill all go to their non-equal opponent. Bringing the knife to strike, he makes quick and sharp attacks, cutting someone else's body like paper, cutting it on the chest, then on the shoulders and arms, then along the stomach and legs, while the monster himself roars with might and main, not understanding how he should react and what exactly to do, since he is not even in being able to concentrate on a single stroke. And it is because of this that soon a huge and tortured body falls forward with a loud slap, crushing a couple of zombies and bleeding while the player himself manages to jump aside. He thinks triumphantly that, of course, the bite acts only on the trunk, not on the limbs, but there is a chance. And at some point, finally, he manages to breathe calmly, while his brothers pounce on the defeated enemy, groaning loudly and shouting at the same time, either trying to thank him for such a generous gift, or something else, while helicopters flying towards the supermarket can be seen outside the window. The purple-haired man immediately tries to squeeze through the crowd, which began to bite into someone else's flesh and tear it apart, at the same time absorbing it, as if there was nothing wrong with it, while Lin himself even thinks with some frustration that this man, it seems, could talk. He himself is more advanced, and his intelligence is clearly higher than the rest, so why does it still not work out? How is this even possible? But immediately there is a booming sound of an approaching propeller, which makes the player instantly distracted from everything that is possible, raising his head up and freezing in shock, looking forward. Literally immediately a notification pops up that asks him to pay attention to the fact that a special event is taking place in his region. The army. Over the next 48 hours, the military will invade the city. Their arrival is conditioned by the fulfillment of a certain task. Holding his still wounded arm and standing in the middle of the crowd, the guy continues to look out the window in complete shock, and starting to think about why the army is here at all, and in such numbers. What could have brought them to some abandoned supermarket, which is simply teeming with monsters without them? Immediately, the notification continues, trying to explain everything that is happening and what the further result may be. Interfering with this event will trigger various additional missions. He can get hints about his main mission, so he should treat this event accordingly. A huge smile reappears on his face. Finally, at least some clues to the main task. Of course, the guy will intervene. Another pop-up notification informs that Lin somehow launched a hidden mission in a special event patients. He should go to the hospital where those very patients are before the end of the event and find the trapped doctor. The reward is just hints to the main task. For a moment, the youngster thinks after reading everything. The army, the captured doctor, the hospital. It all sounds somehow not very simple, even terribly complicated. Not only will you have to face the soldiers for a certain time, but also save some doctor. And again a new notification pops up, which reminds you that it's 9 o'clock in the evening. This means that the activity of zombies increases significantly at night, so he should find a safe place as soon as possible. The purple-haired man only blinks at this in confusion before it gradually begins to reach him, and he instantly changes his face. Increased activity. Damn it. And as luck would have it, that furious red-eyed look is felt from behind again, from which all the blood inside freezes. At the same second, the whole bitten and wounded bully jumps off the floor, scattering all the zombies that were thrown at him on different sides, while he runs to the hero again, shouting "Die," while the latter only has time to look at him, for which he then paid. The man tears off a piece of flesh on his shoulder, running further and further growling, while Ian himself is only able to stare at his hand in complete shock. Even if zombies don't feel pain, it hurts anyway. Starting to tremble from such a fierce bite and damage to his body, the purple-haired man clenches his teeth and stretches the second limb forward, causing the palm to immediately light up again with a blue aura. But the skill is directed not at the stopped big guy, but at the surviving dead, who immediately begin attacking the opponent again, as soon as the commander again shouted what was deciphered as "Stop him, bite him to death." And he immediately rushes to run, mentally calling himself a blockhead and the last fool, since he almost threw off his skates, simultaneously grabbing a sophisticated hand while the monster behind yells everything, but fights off small fellows, throwing them anywhere, while his gaze is directed exclusively at the kid. After a couple of minutes, he finds himself on the ground floor, near some kind of internal store or pharmacy, asking the void if it is here. But, of course, no one answers him. It would be necessary to treat the wounds, but now his stamina is not enough, and the commander's skill will not be used either. That's why we need to come up with another way to kill this monster. At least, that's what Jan thinks, bandaging his sophisticated arm with bandages, creating a kind of splint and tying it around his neck. This fat man is fiercer at night, and ordinary zombies will be afraid of him. But this will be enough, because he will give him a sip of cocktail. He puts a rag in a bottle of alcohol, which he sets on fire, before standing near the doorway, waiting for someone to growl discontentedly and menacingly from the corridor. Just coming out of his little shelter, he thinks that he will finish this fat guy right here, because here he simply cannot turn around because of his huge size, which is why he will become an ideal target. And then, as if by the dictates of fate, the same monster appears from around the corner. Here he is. His face became even more disgusting, as it was all torn, bitten and bloody. Zombies clearly inflicted most of the possible damage on him, but this did not soften the situation, as the man continues to quietly growl "kill." Immediately, the bully, as if some demon possessed him, rushes down the corridor, grabbing at different surfaces for a greater opportunity for a push, while his red eyes sparkle viciously in the dark. The guy, squeezing the bottle of alcohol harder in his healthy hand, thinks only that the opponent still has plenty of health. Judging by the speed at which this big guy moves at all, only this jerk met him. And at the same moment, the purple-haired man jumps out of the pharmacy's warehouse, quickly and sharply throwing forward a bottle with a homemade Molotov cocktail that flared up only brighter, which at the same moment breaks on the face of the bully with a ringing crack. The spilled alcohol from the burning napkin instantly begins to blaze with fire itself, burning the rotten flesh of the Lord, leaving numerous burns and reducing attempts to survive to a minimum. And the guy himself immediately jumps up, raising the knife to strike, while his own eyes sparkle no worse than others. Meanwhile, the opponent begins to scream heart-rendingly, being struck by a bright flame, which was certainly not going to fade in the near future. The player says goodbye to him with a grin before the tip of the blade pierces someone else's head, and from such a huge wound immediately begins to spray blood with a fountain, staining everything around it. After that, when the remnants of the undead burned down, and the flame gradually faded by itself, Lin leaned against the wall, breathing heavily and sweating. Damn it, he was tired to death. And at the same moment, some kind of bell rings, notifying that the zombie lord has been defeated. A sharply pop-up notification asks him to pay attention to the fact that he has already managed to defeat the overlord in the mall, and now the territory belongs to Jan himself. Is he sure that he wants to take this place? He immediately clicks confirm, deciding to see what advantages this has in general. After all, could it even be something bad? And in an instant, a bright green glow begins to envelop him, which was also after the first 10 experience points scored. Ian only looks at everything that is happening with a slight shock before he almost squeaks with happiness as soon as the status window pops up in front of his face. Damn it, he was given as much as 45 experience points. The Overlord's bonus is also impressive. It's just a bloodbath. 10 units were added to strength and agility, intelligence was increased by 1 point, and endurance increased by as much as 20 units. The status that was previously empty was also updated, but now it had several characteristics: Midnighter, which increases the activity of zombies by 50%, and Overlord, which increases the power only on its territory. And there are only some 5 points left until the next evolution. It's a pity, of course, that this bonus is limited and has at least some effects only on the territory of this very shopping center. But the youngster does not even have time to think about it, as some incomprehensible sounds begin to be heard from the side, from which he immediately shudders and tries to determine their source, turning his head like a jerboa. A whole squad can be instantly seen in the window, which instantly heads inside in full armor and combat readiness. And behind them, all armored vehicles also drive up on tires. The dumbfounded Lin can only be outraged, not understanding why so many soldiers not only turned out to be here, but also trying to get inside. For what? Did they also need some ammunition? Or was it all done for some other business? Once inside, one of the soldiers shouts about cleaning up the zombies, attracting the attention of the others, who quickly rush into the mall, pointing their machine guns forward. All the men were dressed as is typical of the real special forces, with all body armor and many others. They are definitely ready for this little mess, unlike the others, yes, even the same survivors who had previously decided to go for supplies with a soldier. And as befits good hosts, zombies meet their guests at the very threshold, lining up in a huge, endless crowd, which immediately begins to scream in unison when bullets with all the whistling pierce through their bodies, instantly sending them to the next world. And the soldiers do not skimp on giving them a couple more dozens of similar lead bullets in the body, or even in the forehead. The player watching this horror from behind his saving corner is drenched in 7th sweat, clenching his jaws in tension. It's strange, he thinks. The soldiers came in and broke loose. Could it have anything to do with his overlord influence at all? But TVI, his gaze catches something much more terrifying. Not only has the whole army burst in here, but a huge car with a combat installation on the roof also begins to drive in, crushing all the dead in its path. Damn it, too many people, and besides, armored vehicles. A second car immediately drove in, and the military began to pick up the corpses, dragging them by the legs somewhere to the side, clearly not intending to bury them. Moreover, they took absolutely everyone and indiscriminately. With a stricken face that expresses only shock and nothing more, Jan continues to stare at this terrible cacophony, as if at some point he could wake up and return home safely. But no, everything is much more complicated and dangerous. Being subjected to panic, he immediately thinks about whether they are going to deploy their entire base here by chance. If this is really the case, then everything is very, very bad.